In today's rubric, or in today's lesson, we're going to go over the narrative writing rubric. So this is, remember, for a story that has a beginning, middle, end, problem, solution. It has characters and setting. Um, so it may be a little bit different, or it is going to be a little bit different in the middle section, but we're still going to go over what the focus is, how well you stick to that focus, how well your story is organized, um, how well you elaborate and provide details within your narrative, the types of language and vocabulary you use, and your conventions. And remember, that's the cups. So let's talk about what these different scores are. And so on your paper, I want you to write for a 4, that's a great paper. Let me spin that around. If it's a 3, let me see if I can spin that around. You can write it small or you can write it vertical. Let's try that with the second one. A 3 paper is good. I was afraid that might happen. One more time. There we go. So write good. Okay. It's kind of crooked, but that's okay. A 2 paper is just okay. That's probably what many of your drafts are going to be like. Most students start off with a 2, and then through our revising, we make it into a good or a great paper. And then a 1 paper is poor. It has a lot of mistakes. It's difficult to understand. Let's see if I can make it right. There we go, that 90 degrees. And then a 1 paper would be unacceptable. Okay, let's see if I can close that, edit it one more time. There we go. Just flip some of these around. 90 degrees. And let's make that. There we go. So that's a 16 font, Mrs. Galatayud. A 3 is good. And I promise I won't mess too much with this. I don't have my document camera with me, so it's a little difficult to just manipulate it with the computer. Okay, and then this one is poor. And we're going to go over just what these different, how you earn some of these different scores. So let me zoom in. We're going to focus on a 3 paper and a 4 paper. So I wonder, can I mark up this text with highlighting? So let's talk about the focus. So the narrative, real or imagined, is clearly focused and maintained throughout, effectively establishes a setting, narrator, and or characters. Okay, so I'm going to have you highlight or underlined clearly focused. And I want you to underline effectively establishes setting, characters. Okay. So your character may be a narrator, and we're going to talk about that when we do our point of view lesson. Now, a good paper is similar. The narrative, real or imagined, is adequately focused and generally maintained throughout. Adequately establishes a setting, narrator, and or characters. So if you compare this to a great paper, it says adequately versus clearly. So adequately just means good enough. So it has those adequately establishes setting and characters. It means it has that, and it does a good job, a good enough job on it. Not effectively, that means not great, but it's good. Next, let's go over to the organization. So the narrative, real or imagined, has an effective plot, helping create unity and completeness. So an effective plot. And a plot is the series of events that happens throughout the story. Remember that a plot also has that climax, the most exciting part, building that suspense. So effective, consistent use of variety of transitional strategies, logical sequence of events from beginning to end, effective opening and closure for audience and purpose. So there's that word effective again. Effective, consistent use of a variety of transitional strategies, logical sequence of events from beginning to end, effective opening and closure for audience and purpose. And we're going to talk about how to start a good beginning and how to do a good closure or good ending. Let's take a look at a good paper, number 3. The narrative, real or imagined, has an evident plot helping create a sense of unity and completeness, though there may be minor flaws and some ideas may be loosely connected. So, evident plot. I know that there's a beginning, middle, end, but there may be some minor flaws. So, adequate, again, means good enough. Adequate use of a variety of transitional strategies, so different kinds of strategies. Adequate sequence of events from beginning to end. Adequate opening and closure. Let's talk about, I kind of want to bring in that too before I get any further. Because like I said, many students start with a 2-paper with their rough draft. So let's go back to that focus and see how that's different from effective or adequate. The narrative, real or imagined, is somewhat maintained and may have a minor drift in focus. Inconsistently establishes a setting and or character. So it has it, but it's just not consistent. Let's take a look at a 1. The narrative, real or imagined, may be maintained, but may provide little or no focus. So maybe maintained, highlight that B, may provide little or no focus. So may be very brief. So some of you do have a 1 paper. It's very, very short. Major drift. Your story just takes a turn and I have no idea where you're going because your focus may be confusing. Confusing or ambiguous. Ambiguous means unclear. So again, many of you have a setting and characters, but it's just somewhat maintained. It's just not consistent. So a good job at creating a setting and characters. That's going to be important, or a great job. Let's take a look at that organization. The narrative, real or imagined, has inconsistent plot and flaws are evident. So with a 3 paper, there may be some minor flaws, like some flaws or mistakes. But with an okay paper, the flaws are there. I know it's a draft. Let's take a look at a 1 paper. The narrative, real or imagined, has little or no discernible plot. I don't know what the beginning, middle, end is. There are I forgot to go back to it too. I'm sorry. Inconsistent use of basic transitional strategies with little variety. Uneven sequence of events. Opening and closure, if present, that means if you have it, they're weak. We need to use some strategies for that. And a weak connection among the ideas. For a 1 paper, there are few or no transitional strategies. And there's frequent extraneous ideas, and those may intrude. So what that means is that there's a lot of extra information here that has nothing to do with your narrative, and it's just information in there. I haven't seen a whole lot of that this year. Maybe the transitional strategies are missing, but many of you do a pretty good job at using your pre-writing to set up your draft. Okay, let's talk about, zoom back in, the elaboration of the narrative. So the narrative, real or imagined, provides thorough and effective elaboration using details, dialogue, and description. So this is all about elaborating, means providing extra information, go into deeper details. So effective use of narrative techniques, so this might be a dialogue, that advance the story or illustrate the experience. That's that show, not tell description. Let's take a look at a good paper. The narrative, real or imagined, provides, let's go here, thorough and effective. This one is just adequate elaboration using details, dialogue, and description. Effective use, adequate use of a variety of narrative techniques that generally advance the story or illustrate the experience. Let's take a look at two papers. So this is where many of you start for your draft. The narrative, real or imagined, provides uneven cursory elaboration. So cursory means like on the outside, like it's not specific to what you're describing, using partial details, dialogue, or description. So the narrative techniques, if present, are uneven and inconsistent. So narrative techniques, if you have them, this is pretty much all of it. If you have them, they're uneven or inconsistent. Like it's just the beginning. And that's why I say many students start with a 2, because in our draft, we're just beginning to write our narratives and then we go back and make it better. How do we make it better? How do we make it better? That would be turning it into a good paper or to a great paper. Some of you may even start with a 1. The narrative, real or imagined, provides minimal elaboration, using little or no details, dialogue, or description. Those are those narrative techniques. So is minimal, the use of narrative techniques is minimal, it's absent, in error, that means you need some help understanding how to use those narrative techniques, or it's irrelevant. You're providing details that have nothing to do with advancing your story. All right, let's go to our next focus, which is vocabulary, language and vocabulary. So the types of words you choose to use. Oh yeah, too big. Let's go back here. The narrative, real or imagined, clearly and effectively expresses the experiences or events. So effective use of sensory, concrete, and figurative language clearly advance the purpose. So what that means is that the details that you choose to provide, this is similar to that elaboration, because the types of words that you use help to communicate those details. So sensory, concrete, figurative language, that's the focus of this whole column. And then how well you do at that, whether it's effective, or in this next one, it says the narrative, real or imagined, adequately expresses those experiences and events. So adequate use, I'll go back here, effective use of sensory, concrete, I'm just going to highlight all of it. Sensory, concrete, and figurative language generally advance. So we have effectively use, clearly advance, adequate use, generally advance. This is what our goal is to use key words, key language to help communicate and paint a picture for our reader. Let's go to a 2 and a 1 paper. The narrative, real or imagined, unevenly expresses experiences or events. So partial or weak use of sensory, concrete, and figurative language may not advance the purpose. So even if you have them, it's not helping your story. You can't just choose words and pick them and stick them in. No. For a poor paper, the narrative, real or imagined, expression of ideas is vague. It lacks clarity or is confusing. Uses limited language, so that might just be everyday words, may have little sense or purpose. You didn't go through your draft and help to choose specific spots to help paint a picture for your reader. If you didn't do that, then you get poor for language and vocabulary. Now this last section here, there we go, is I'm going to write in that word cups right at the top. So when you think convention, think cups. This is when we're editing our paper. Let's see if I can make this bigger. Oh, that's nice and big. Cups. Capitalization, grammar usage, punctuation, spelling. How well you do with these conventions. Notice how it's such a small section of our paper. The focus, the organization, elaboration, language and vocabulary, that's going to be all revising. Cups, our editing, is just one column. So let's take a look at how you can do better at conventions, or what a 4 paper looks like with conventions. The narrative, real or imagined, demonstrates a strong command of conventions. Few, if any, errors in that usage and sentence formation, effective and consistent use of punctuation, capitalization, and spelling. Compared to a good paper, the narrative, real or imagined, demonstrates an adequate command of conventions. You see that word adequate all throughout the 3. Adequate means good enough. Effective means great. They do a great job at that. I see that word effective all through 4. I see adequate all through 3. Some errors in usage and sentence formation, but no systematic pattern of errors is displayed. Okay, so you don't really know, like maybe you just went too quickly or you missed something in your editing, so there's no systematic pattern of errors. Adequate use of punctuation, capitalization, and spelling. So here's the U in cups, and this is that C, P, and S for cups. Okay, get out of here. There we go. An okay paper. So this is where the draft usually starts. The narrative, real or imagined, demonstrates partial. Where are you? Partial. I clicked too many times. Partial command of conventions. There are frequent errors, may obscure meaning, means they may be a little confusing. Inconsistent use of punctuation, capitalization, and spelling. Lastly, I see few papers that have poor use of conventions, okay? But I'm still going to go over it. The narrative, real or imagined, demonstrates a lack of command of conventions. You have no clue when to capitalize, what different types of sentences to use. Your spelling is all off. Your punctuation is all off. So errors are frequent and severe. And meaning is often obscured. Like, it's very difficult to understand what you're saying. And of course, a 0 paper all the way across, a response gets no credit if it provides no evidence of the ability to write a narrative text. If you have no clue how to write anything, you don't write anything at all, then you get a 0. That one should be pretty obvious to you. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And if I can just explain this in a nutshell, from the different areas that you will be grading on, if you do an effective job at it, then you get a 4. And sometimes you might get a 4 in one section and a 3 in another, but 4, effective. Good means adequate, means good enough. In a 3, I saw a lot of somewhat, uneven, partial. So that's an okay paper. That means you're just starting. And for many students, the 2 is where you have the draft. For a few of you, you have a 3 paper, and so I want you to create a good paper. If you have a okay paper, then I want you to have a good paper. I still have some students who have maybe one or two areas that are poor, but I can't think of one student whose draft is at a poor level, but it's still there. So you may have minor drifts and you don't use certain things, like you forget to put a plot or you don't have a beginning. Maybe you didn't use any dialogue, or your language is a little confusing, or very, very basic, then you might get a 1. And I still have a few of you who have a 0 because you don't turn anything in. But that's the goal, is to get to a 3 or 4. Some of you who have 0, try to at least get a 2. Everyone is capable of doing an okay, a good, or a great paper.